Welcome, everyone. This is the third panelist discussion with the San Antonio Public Library. This is again, our third panelist discussion. We will be talking about 20 years of esports. So what will that entail? What and when was your first experience with esports? And compared to 20 years ago, what do you think is the biggest contributing factor to the growth of esports? I'm going to be your host, Georgina Garcia. I am the teen librarian at Bizon Library. I've got Brianna Rangel from Mission Library, who will be assisting with moderating, as well with Stephanie Vasquez. So why don't we go around and introduce yourselves, state your name and your occupation.
Chris Science, Texas Gaming Empire founder and co-owner. Also manages the store Play Live Nation off 1604 in Culebra. So if you ever want to try the latest and hottest video games, come see us over there.
I guess I'll go next. Hi, I'm Ansley Partosa. I am representing the Greater Gaming Society of San Antonio. We are a community of game developers, game enthusiasts, and people who like to collaborate and make games. And then I'm also representing the San Antonio Smash community, so Smash Ultimate.
My name is Travis Yang, and I am the head esports coach for Texas A&M San Antonio.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Pimienta, and I'm the head esports coach at St. Mary's University.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Again, we really appreciate you being here. And let's go ahead and kick off our topic of discussion, 20 years of esports. So let us know in what capacity have you been involved with esports? Let us know your experience. And again, what has been the biggest contributing factor to the growth of esports?
I'll start with just sharing kind of a personal experience. Kind of first when I learned about esports was probably around 2008, 2007, when I was still in middle school. Obviously not competing or anything close to that. That was my first experience playing Counter-Strike Source, kind of doing a little bit of community building there. And then as a result of that, learning about, professional players or these leagues that you could compete in. That was my first time hearing about those kinds of things. And that kind of learning experience is what led me to, later in high school, when StarCraft 2 came out, trying again to make a team there. And obviously with modern esports coming in, I'm sure we'll touch on that later. But that's kind of when I first learned about it and kind of what led me into getting into it.
My experience, well, at least with video games in general, my first system I started was an N64 when I was like a little kid, but starting off in esports, I believe it was like 2 years ago when I got more serious into esports. I believe on the last time we talked, I explained how my first tournament, I was brought there by my friend Joe, and that my first tournament that I went to was here in San Antonio at Otaku Cafe for a Smash, where it was, I think, Smash 4 at the time. And I was there at the first tournament, and after that first tournament, I loved the experience because I met a lot of people who played like just like me, but like without the weird connections of online. And then I can meet a lot of people in person and see that it's like a living community, like you see them on streams a lot, like, oh man, that guy's like the best player in like America or their state, but then seeing them in person is like you can walk up to any regular person and play with them. So that was pretty cool.
Does anybody else want to share their experience? Even if you didn't participate in esports back then, how is your participation with esports now?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of beat to my own drum. I always kind of saw esports. Like when they had the Street Fighter thing on TV, I'd kind of give it a glance every once in a while. But really just my passion for competition and then just games that I really like kind of got me involved in the esports. And it's been pretty crazy to see it grow over the last few years. So I've never been like a competitor. I just enjoy like putting these competitions together and seeing them play out and see who's the best and go from there.
And when it comes to my first experience in esports, I don't think I became actively involved in esports until I was in college. But growing up, gaming in my household and with my parents around was super normal. Like, that was not a weird thing for us to do. I grew up with my dad, who hosted LAN parties here in San Antonio in the early 2000s for Counter-Strike 1.6, and so I don't know, something about that competitive video game culture has always kind of been a part of my life. However, it took, from being a small kid until I got to university to really kind of ignite that fire again for the competitive side of video games.
So I did want to ask specifically you, Caitlin and Travis, about the collegiate esports. That is something that is brand new. And, this wasn't available 20 years ago. This definitely was not available when I was in college, either undergrad or grad school. How is that participation? How has that increased the interest and, again, the participation with esports?
So collegiate esports is interesting because it's existed in different forms over the past 10, 15 years. Of course, the past few years, with the advent of esports at a professional level, we start to see collegiate esports become more fleshed out and recognized. But it has existed. Most universities, if not every university, has a gaming club, for example, right? A group of people who play games together. And back in the 2000s, because of connectivity issues, you might have some online tournaments or some competitions where universities would play against each other. But for the most part, it actually occurred in person. So universities would host, say, like Caitlin touched on, LAN parties, right? Where they'd host something for their own campus community. Maybe schools could, rival schools or nearby schools could, also come over and compete. But for the most part, they were, centralized type things. It wasn't really until the 2010s when we start to see actual online leagues start to be built out. TESPA, Collegiate Star League, probably the two biggest ones even now. And these are leagues that facilitate competition now at a national level, where you can be in Texas, but you're competing against a team in California for your playoff match. So that's kind of just to give an overview of where it was and kind of where it's at right now.
Yeah, and I think to build off of that, the communities have always been there on campuses. I think in recent years, because esports has become more accessible for students and interested players, it's helped build those communities and get the spotlight on those college clubs, and some of those college gaming and esports clubs. They started to think, well, what if we could become a club sport or a varsity sport or what have you? Once they had that support within their own community, within their own student body, I think that's where you start seeing the start of the growth, especially over the past 5 years. And yeah, I think the organized online play, like with TESPA and Collegiate Star League, just helps to facilitate and foster those communities and the competitive part of gaming, which is esports.
Chris, Ansley, do you have anything to comment on that as far as esports with the community?
Since my main game that I like to play in the community I like to be a part of is Smash Brothers, they have this pretty old documentary. I say old, it's like 6 years, but it's about Smash Melee and these people that would be on like internet forums and they would say, hey, I'm the best on this coast. Well, I'm the best on this coast. But then they're like, okay, we got to prove which coast is the best. So this is like my loose like memorization of this. But then they got to meet up and they had these tournaments. So it's very grassroots. So to think that we went from like lots of grassroots people, even just like regular teens or young adults hanging out and playing and competing, to like now Arlington has a stadium just for esports and it's fantastic. And I like got to go there with friends, and it just is mind blowing to me that such a community could come off of these games, because not just out of city within Texas tournaments, but we've even flown to like Michigan, which was like a super major tournament, which is like a huge tournament of Smash Brothers, like over at Frostbite. And seeing all these people from like even Japan come by and seeing them in person and seeing how big this community came from, with like, it started not just as grassroots, but then they could make an organization. And then from that, they have volunteers. And it's just also creating jobs, like not just coaches, but like graphic artists and then media. It's just such a big growing thing. And I feel like the biggest blow up for esports and continuation is companies get to see like, oh, people are interested in this. How do we advertise our things? So one of my favorite players in Smash right now, Samsor, he was like sponsored by Nesquik and stuff. I was like, oh, that's like a brand household name. And now you're like getting paid by them to show off their brand. I just think it's cool. I don't know.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to add. I think the main accelerant to esports being um, more popular is going to be like Twitch and the visibility that it gets, because then you start getting viewerships, you start getting advertisements and sponsors, and that's where you get the corporate back, like Ansley was pointing out. Um, yeah, that was just my 2 cents.
I think another really important piece that I think about over the past couple of years is two pieces of media that came out highlighting esports. And one was in 2015 from Vice, the $1 Million Game series, and it was like 5 videos where they explored the Dota 2 International and League of Legends Grand Finals for that year. And I mean, this is 2015, this is 5 years ago, and watching that from Vice was really impactful for me, because I mean, Vice covers a bunch of different topics, and so seeing them cover, you know, something that at the time didn't really feel like it was highlighted very much was really special. And the other piece that I remember being super impactful for me personally was the Netflix episode of 7 Days Out for League of Legends, where they interview Double Lift and Rick Fox about, you know, being a professional player in the LCS and having an LCS team. And again, having something like 7 Days Out on Netflix highlight League of Legends, a game that is, you know, beloved by many, is really special and I think really impactful. And I think for me, those are two pieces of media that really stuck out in my mind as like helping to facilitate and grow esports as an industry overall.
So
Yeah,
what do you got? Go ahead, Chris. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
I had actually just recently, because Texas Gaming Empire, nonprofit esports organization, and I had actually just recently put together a proposal to send out to corporations to try and you know, get some donations and sponsorships and stuff. And so I did actually compile some data that coincidentally works really well with this panel. So if you don't mind me to be a little boring and throw out some stats, 72% of American teens play video games recreationally. That's almost 3 out of every 4. You got 400 million fans that, well, pre-COVID, that would pack arenas worldwide to take part and witness esports competitions. There are over 200 colleges, universities that currently offer esports scholarships. Pew poll highlights what a vital role video games play in teens' friendships. Inclusivity and access allow the most wide range net of teens to come together under a coach who also acts as a mentor for their growth and development. 84% of season 0 teens who have competed said they found an entity and people that they could connect with an esports field, which is super impressive. Awareness, esports, in 2017, it was at 1.28 billion. In 2019, 1.57 billion. So it grew by over 100, 150 million each year. Esports audience growth in 2016, there was 160 million casual and 121 million esport enthusiasts. In 2019, it rose up to 307 million casual and 250 million that were esports enthusiasts. That's over 10% growth year over year. In Twitch 2016, you had 591,809 concurrent viewers. In 2019, you had 1,280,000 concurrent viewer average. Hours watching, 2012, 1.3 billion hours. In 2019, 6.6 billion hours. The revenue, 2018, 906 million. By 2021, 1.6 billion. Increased in prize money in different tournaments. Even though they actually made fewer tournaments, the prizes were actually bigger in those fewer tournaments. Yeah, and so I mean, like, year over year, it's just accelerating at a phenomenal pace. And yeah.
So I mean, I've got a lot of questions following up all of those stats, but the biggest question is, what do you guys think has been the contributing factor as to why esports has exploded?
I would say if I had to pick something, it would probably be live streaming. Of all the major innovations that have occurred in esports over the past few years, I think the development, particularly of Twitch TV, which is the preeminent platform right now where people go to, stream tournaments, watch tournaments, stream themselves playing, watch, Ninja, people like that. It's well, it was on Mixer, but now it's all back on Twitch. And if we try to draw comparisons between esports being successful and traditional sports being successful, traditional sports is largely successful. A big part of that industry is because people can watch it on TV. You have broadcasting rights that sustains financially, the franchises in a large part, and kind of makes it all viable. We didn't have that in esports literally up until 2010 pretty much. There was no really any esports broadcasting platform online. If you wanted to watch a tournament or you want to watch a game, pretty much had to watch it on YouTube or whatever the video platform, whatever they were before YouTube. I think in the early 2000s there was, at least in America, there was like a championship gaming series for Counter-Strike. And I'm not sure, I think they might have had a TV deal, which was, unheard of at the time, but that league didn't last very long. It was a bit ahead of its time. So looking at esports pre-Twitch and esports post-Twitch, and Chris referenced a lot of those numbers, the hours watched, the increase in concurrent viewers for these events. I think Twitch plays probably the biggest part, at least in my mind.
And I think like the bigger kind of answer there is accessibility and the improvements in technology. Twitch makes watching games very accessible. You can sign up for a free account and watch as many streamers as you want. There is free software out there for you yourself as a person to stream to Twitch and other similar sites. There is, with Steam and the Epic Games Store and what have you, the increased accessibility to free-to-play games. Some of the most popular esport titles are free-to-play. And the other things to consider is like mobile gaming and virtual machines, other ways to get involved in competitive video games. And I think similar to sports, and that, anyone can kind of pick up a basketball and enjoy basketball, whether as a spectator or playing it with friends. Similar thing can be said about esports, that there are free-to-play games that you can pick up and play with your friends and enjoy it for what it is. So I think technology plays a huge part in that. And similar to our last panel when we talked about, how to connect with those in esports, social media is another huge platform that brings people together, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, now Discord. You can very easily create those communities, and depending on the needs and wants of your community, you can set up those tournaments, you can set up those amateur and local events to help facilitate that like competitive environment that just continues to fuel esports. So I think accessibility is the big reason that we're seeing such large growth.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, accessibility is like super great, and then the improvement of technology as it just gets better and better. Definitely, like, even the word esports was not a common thing until a couple of years ago, right? Like, usually
How to
people would
spell it.
just, yeah, right? You would just see people as like, oh, they're gamers, or even before that, it's just like, oh, there's nerds playing games. I think that especially with Twitch, it's just affected so many like games to be bigger than they probably could have been, even because of the accessibility of viewers and players. And then even for like, since my background and is game development, and with the Greater Gaming Society, a lot of people rely on social media and streamers to stream their game. So like, I'm pretty sure that Rivals of Aether was like an indie game, but now it's like one of the big platforming fighter games, and I've seen them at the same sort of tournaments for Smash. So it's really amazing that like so many games can have a platform purely because people will be able to play them and then watch them, and that just turns into more growth all around.
And I think on the opposite end that we still have to kind of recognize that esports is still not accessible for everyone, because not everyone has high-speed internet to stream or play resource-intensive games with higher-end computers. Not everyone has smartphones with robust data plans, and not everyone has video game consoles. And so as accessible as it is now, I do still think there is a lot of room to continue to make it more accessible and bring more people into the fold. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, gaming really is entertainment, and there's a lot to enjoy.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up, that it's not accessible to everyone, because that makes me remember, like, I mean, of course, we've mentioned all of the LAN centers and a lot of the cyber cafes here in San Antonio, but I think it was like a few years ago, I went and visited Philippines, where my family is from, and it was very interesting because we stayed at a hotel in a major city in Philippines where there were gamers who competed in a tournament for a mobile game on the phone. So they won like $10,000 or something from this mobile game and had a tournament there. And I thought that was wild. Even though I'm already like aware of computer games and console games, like you can win $10,000, like that makes sense to me. But then seeing that in these other countries that do not have like accessible internet or like the best computers, they still have a phone. Everyone still has a phone, whether they have like a regular-ish normal housing situation or not, they can still participate via mobile phones. And I feel like that has increased and been totally mind-blowing because the mobile games have just gotten so much better. The more that people have paid attention or made jobs accessible for people, like you can see the growth over time.
As I was listening to you, Caitlin, do you or any of you guys foresee any hurdles as we move forward with esports aside from the accessibility part?
The accessibility part is a huge challenge that we're trying to tackle, because we do recognize that not everybody has access to high-speed internet or high-end computers or can afford to play, a $40 game. And so we're working on initiatives to help bridge that gap, whether it be merit-based and need-based esports scholarships or youth camps, where it is a very low cost, or the cost is covered by our program for students or players who may otherwise never been able to have that opportunity in middle school or high school, have that opportunity with us. But I think going forward, alongside that, one of the other issues that we may, or not issues, but one of the challenges that we may face is diversity and inclusion in esports. Right now, I can't say with 100% certainty that I feel super represented in esports and gaming. There's not a whole lot of people that look like me in similar positions. And so that may discourage students and players from wanting to become part of these communities or wanting to be part of a college esports program, or, you know, try to make the run for a professional game, what have you. And so I think for me personally, those are going to be the two challenges that I keep on my mind going forward.
And so part of the nonprofit side of Texas Gaming Empire is to try and get like donations and stuff from these big corporations, not only for like prize money for tournaments and scholarships for kids, but then also to be able to afford to get kids who don't have that accessibility to be able to go to the different gaming venues in San Antonio. And so that's one thing we're definitely working on the Texas Gaming Empire side. And I think that's SA Library had mentioned something about trying to open up their accessibility for gamers who are trying to game and don't necessarily have those tools at home and stuff. So they are hurdles, but there are hurdles that we are working hard to overcome, and we will get there.
And I'll say, actually, to kind of go a different route, another example of a challenge in esports right now, and I think Chris might, once I bring this up, he'll probably want to talk about it, the Esports Bubble. When we look at the financial side of esports, right now esports is in an interesting place because it is a new segment of sports, right? It's just, you know, we're watching the formation of esports live. It's not traditional sports that have been around for, you know, dozens or in some cases hundreds of years. When we look at esports right now, the industry is not quite sustainable yet traditionally. Like on paper, it's a lot of venture capital, a lot of just seed funding, stuff like that. When you look at all the major pro teams, you know, Team Liquid, Cloud9, whatever, they are able to sustain because, you know, they're raising, again, the rounds of funding, enough money to pay out their players and continue operating. I think, in fact, the only team that I've heard of that was actually sustainable on their own, this was a few months ago, I think, is FaZe Clan, one of the biggest esports entities, teams in the world right now. And that's because, you know, they have a huge following. They're able to sell enough in merchandise to be profitable there. But to tie it back into the bubble part, the problem is, you know, these sponsors coming in and these people putting their money, they're doing that kind of with the understanding, with the hope that in 5 years, the industry will become sustainable enough and enough consumers will come in to, you know, purchase their products, and it'll make sense, right? The consumers come in, put their money, the sponsors get their return on investment, everything works out. But there is a world in, say, that doesn't happen. They don't get their return on investment, you know, in 5 years, 10 years, and they pull out. These teams literally collapse because they have no actual profit model that works. Now, this, I will say, this is different from the collegiate model. I think the collegiate model is quite sustainable. It follows much more closely with the traditional athletics model, which we know works. But this is just to touch on the larger esports bubble, and I don't want to make it sound super scary or anything like that. But it is definitely you know, something that is talked about right now in the industry.
Yeah, Travis is absolutely right. Like one of my main like narratives that I push is like, this is pioneering a new path. Like we're literally setting the roots, the foundation for something amazing for the city that'll change the landscape of it, you know, creating a new industry. And so I've really been trying to push towards like local businesses like your HEB, your Whataburger and stuff, just to kind of grow it here in San Antonio and then in Texas. And yeah, it is hard because I mean, then, you know, you kind of start getting into smaller businesses and they can't even wait the 5 to 10 years. Like they're looking for something like immediate and stuff. And so, I mean, the getting people on board is the struggle. the biggest obstacle I'm currently facing. But we're working hard to get that, and that's why I try and communicate with like the two coaches here and stuff like that, and they definitely help support and lend leverage to the things that we're trying to do. Because I mean, then the other thing is you're trying to create something, and you've got this new business, and they're like, who's Texas Gaming Empire? Why should I trust you with money? Like, who are you? And so even though I've been at it for 5 years and stuff like that, just really bringing it to the mainstream and trying to do something special with it, where we can change the landscape for San Antonio and the state of Texas.
Yeah, I like the points you guys brought up, because definitely sustainability and showing that companies that esports and these teams and these players are worth investing in is sort of a struggle right now, because sure, you can have them advertise or have the player advertise, but I'm sure that if they didn't get the clicks that they needed, or if they didn't get like the sales that they needed with the affiliate links, then the sponsor might pull out and just say, I don't see how this can profit us if we keep like supporting them. Because I know some people think that esports jerseys are kind of like a NASCAR sticker, where it's like, oh, you put the sponsor brand on there, you're good, they're going to pay for it. But those profitable returns are definitely something that people struggle with. And I also wanted to touch a little bit on what was said earlier about another kind of hurdle to face is like the inclusivity of esports, because not even just like for gender situations, but for like accessibility of people in general, I know people are trying very hard to like include others other than just like maybe the perceived notion that it is male dominated, which it usually is. Like that's not a fact that has to be bad or seen like poorly, but the way that we can see it is how can we move on from here for it to be more inclusive. Like, for example, League of Legends definitely has a colorblind mode, which is great. And that's like fantastic for players and opens up doors for everyone to be able to play with. And I'm not sure where everyone feels on like tournaments specifically for genders and stuff, but I participated in a tournament, like a side tournament called Smash Sisters, which is more for women or even transgendered people or any kind of diversity, as long as it's like not a cis male, because it is to include and have a casual tournament even for like the ladies of this demographic. So I think it was very helpful to have these sort of things, even like a ladies' night for gaming, while it may be a little bit sus because it's like, oh, well, it's just for women and you're excluding people. Well, the point is to show that there is an inclusive place and you don't got to feel judged or something, or you don't got to feel intimidated. Like, I think those things really do help in the long run.
Yeah, that's one thing we did last year for NBA 2K Online. We had a women's 2K league, and there was a little bit of pushback on social media by a few haters or whatever, like, why just women, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, the reality is they don't get much viewership on the big stage for like, because there's an NBA 2K league that has like legit NBA teams that own 2K teams and stuff like that. So, just trying to give them the visibility and stuff like that. And then also at Play Live, we've had like women's gaming nights, and we've also wanted to kind of put together a women's gaming conference in the future, but COVID kind of threw everything off the rails. But hopefully we can pick that back up once we get to a new normal with that situation.
Yeah, I think both are really important to have. I think the women and women identifying groups are very important to have as stepping stones into esports. That this is a group that is supportive. This is a group where you can ask questions, play games, and get your first taste of gaming and esports, or the organized competitive play in a really structured environment. And all of the other competitions are not going away just because one additional competition is coming into the space. I don't think it takes away or detracts from local amateur, collegiate, or professional organized esports play. I think more than anything, it is a welcomed addition to the overall esports competitive landscape. And and not just for playing esports, but I think like professional women of esports groups are important to have, because within the gaming and esports industry, it is still fairly male dominated. We're not seeing as many game developers or engineers who are women, as we have also seen with players. They're mostly men. So again, I don't think these kind of groups or initiatives take away from the larger competitive space or the industry space. I think it's a benefit and it's a welcomed addition, right? It's not going to make anything else go away, but the hope is that it can provide a path for those to come into the space and feel welcome and included.
I think all of y'all touched on a lot of inclusivity topics and issues, which are wonderful. And I say wonderful because, you know, your organization is trying to look for ways to be more inclusive. And that's definitely a way to lead in the positive direction. I do hate to say this, we're almost out of time. This was a really, really good conversation. I had more questions for you guys as you guys were talking. I kept writing down some information, but unfortunately, you know, I just don't have the time. But I will let my colleagues know. Maybe we can add these questions for a future panel discussion. Before closing though, do you guys have any comments, any questions regarding this topic?
Okay, well, one of the things I wanted to say was like with the whole 20 years of esports is not only have they made jobs available, but even these players that have become famous through their games, like there's this one book that I really like by Daigo Umehara. His book is called The Will to Keep Winning. And Daigo is like specializing in 2D arcade fighting games, mostly released by Capcom. And he's one of the most world famous Street Fighter players. It's a really good read because it like goes into the mentality of a player, and like it goes into the mentality of like winning and losing. I feel like it could almost be like one of those applicable to daily life. So I don't know. If people want to check that out, I think it's cool that a book on esports by an esports player was published. So
I think that is amazing how esports is just going into, you know, it's stemming out. Again, I don't associate esports with something like, you know, cycling, pro cycling, but it's really cool to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you guys. I have listened to the previous previous panels that you guys have discussed with my colleagues. I think they're amazing. You guys provide valuable information, and I'm going to go ahead and close out this interview.
The info for the Greater Gaming Society. I'm most reachable by email, ansley.partos@gmail.com. I'm also on Discord, and I have a Twitch where I stream occasionally, and you can find the Greater Gaming Society Facebook group there. And there's also links for the social media on the Greater Gaming Society Facebook. And the San Antonio Smash Ultimate community, you can find them by searching up their Facebook group.
Hey guys, Chris Sines here, founder and owner of Texas Gaming Empire, also store manager of Play Live Nation. All my contact information is there. Feel free to call or text me on my cell phone. You can email, you can go to our website and drop a line, Twitter, Facebook, Discord, whatever's the best route for you. And don't hesitate to bug me, shoot those messages. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Caitlin Thienta. I'm the head esports coach at St. Mary's University. The best way to reach me directly is going to be through email or Discord. If you are interested in our program, you can go to my Twitter and there will be a link to our information.
Hey, I'm Travis Yang, head esports coach with A&M San Antonio. Best way to reach out to me is on Discord, followed by email. Also, we have a community/team Discord, and you can find that as well on our Twitter.